Hello everyone, my name is Lakara Pepes and welcome to my YouTube channel. In today's video, I will be taking you guys through information sources. That is to say the definition, what information sources mean, and then the purpose of information sources, and then also the types of information sources. So that brings us to the first one, which is what are information sources. Now, information sources are simply channels or materials used to obtain knowledge, and they simply include the print sources, digital sources, the human sources. And then remember, examples of print sources are books, like books and or journals. And then the digital sources are these other ones that you find online, that is the websites or database. And then human sources, these are like experts or interviews. Now the experts, these are people who have studied more about a certain type of topic or program, so they become experts in that field. And then the purpose of information sources. Now, information sources are to support research, provide evidence, and also to enhance our understanding. And then I'll also take you guys through published information sources. Now, published information sources are just the formally produced and distributed information, and their characteristics are they are reviewed or edited before release, and then they are credible and structured, and then they are also publicly accessible. Now, they are reviewed or edited before release. This means that the information it goes through a bunch of people who first see it and make sure that it's verified, and then they go ahead and publish it. And then the information also is public, like it can be accessed by the public. For example, let's say the newspapers, yes, it's accessible to the public. And then the examples of the of published information sources are academic journals, yes, these are just articles, yeah, and then textbooks, yeah, and then government reports and the newspapers I mentioned earlier. And then we also have primary and secondary sources of information. Now, primary sources are just original and first-hand sources of information, and then secondary sources of information are interpretation or analysis of the primary data. And the purposes of primary information is to provide direct evidences, and secondary sources is just to explain or to critique primary sources. And the examples of primary sources are experiments, interviews, or raw data. Then the examples of secondary sources are textbooks, reviews, or articles. Now, the benefits of primary sources is that it is highly reliable, but also may need some interpretation. And then for secondary sources, in terms of reliability, it just depends on the author's analysis, yeah. And then we have here scholarly versus popular sources. Now, the features are, first of all, the audience. In the scholarly sources, audience are researchers and academics. And then in popular sources, the audience are general public. And then another feature for scholarly sources is in terms of review process. For scholarly sources, it is peer reviewed, and then for popular sources, it is non-peer reviewed. Now, in terms of language, scholarly sources are technical and formal, but in popular sources, it's just simple and informal. Now, the examples of scholarly sources are journals, articles, and theses. Now, the examples of popular sources are magazines, blogs, news, or sites. And then we also have format types of information. Now, these are just the different formats of information. That includes the print, which is the books, the journals, and the newspapers. In digital, we have ebooks, online articles, or databases. Then multimedia, these are videos, podcasts, and documentaries. And then data formats, we have statistics or data sets. And then I would also like to talk about elements of published sources. Now, there are key elements of published sources. For example, we have the author, that's the person who has created the work. Then we also have the title, that's the name of the work. We have the date, that is when the work was published. Then we have publisher. Publisher majorly is the organization which is responsible for the publication of the work. Then we have the abstract. Abstract is simply the summary of the content. It simply tells a person what the article is all about. The references, these are just like the sources that has been cited. So for example, a journal article contains an abstract, introduction, methodology, results, discussion, and finally references. So this brings me to the end of today's video. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and also share my work.